now. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and start. So nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Nadia Segura. I'm the directing attorney of the Small Business Program at Tzedek, and I'm very happy to be here and have you in this conversation. Tzedek is a nonprofit that has been around for over 40 years. We provide free legal services to individuals and small business owners in Los Angeles County in a wide variety of areas. So if you need assistance with something else that is not small business related, I will just encourage you to go to our website and see the other resources that we have available for the community, because today in specific, we will focus on our small business program. And all the services that we provide through Tzedek are provided regardless of an individual's race, religion, ethnicity, or immigration status. So the small business program is designed to help low to moderate income entrepreneurs and small business owners secure free legal assistance. And we have different programs through the small business program in which we support the community. We have community presentations and workshops like these ones. We have a couple more coming in the next few weeks. And I would suggest that you check the calendar on our website so you can register for the other events that we will have available. The next one is related to commercial leases. So if you have questions around your commercial lease, you can go ahead and register. We also have our small business legal academies, which are a combination of presentations, but also one-to-one consultations with attorneys. So during those small business legal academies, we are able to connect you with an attorney the day of, so they can provide answers to general legal questions and go ahead and do a complete intake with you. The next Small Business Legal Academy is scheduled for June 6th, so in less than a month, and you can also register for that event through our website. And then we have guides and other free resources available on the website. The resources are available in different languages, including Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean. And then we also have, of course, our direct legal representation. So through the small business program, we focus on helping small business owners with transactional legal matters. What that means is that if a matter is already in litigation, it's outside of the services that we can provide, but we are able to connect you through other organizations that provide assistance of related to litigation. So if you have questions regarding a litigation case, feel free to just reach out to us, and we will be happy to connect you with lawyers that can assist in litigation. The work that we do, as I said, is strictly transactional. So what that means is that we can help you in a lot of things. If you already have a business, we can help incorporate the business and, for example, start an LLC. If you have contract questions, commercial lease agreements, we can help you review the commercial contracts or the lease agreements. We are seeing related to commercial leases, people have questions how negotiating with their landlords. So we can also assist you with that. Besides that, we can help you with intellectual property if you have questions on how to register your trademark. And of course, as the presentation today, we can help you to answer general questions regarding insurance. So those are the services that we provide. We do have some eligibility criteria. The first step, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, is to fill out our online application. I will put the link on the chat. But it is important to mention that to be able to get these free legal services, we will ask you a couple of questions related to your income, because as I said before, our focus is to assist low to moderate income entrepreneurs. We also are limited to helping for-profit businesses. So if you are a nonprofit, again, reach out to us and we will connect you with other organizations that work with nonprofits. And as I said before, our services are transactional. We have, as I said, our online application. That one is also available in different languages. And then all the services that we provide can also be provided in different languages. And then how to get help. So this is my email in case you have specific questions. I will put the application for assistance on the chat. Once you send the application, it usually takes us between 2 to 4 days to get back to you. And connect you either with someone on the team that will schedule a call to get to know more about your business and your needs, or provide resources that may be helpful for you. And then if you go to the website, as I said, you can check the calendar for the upcoming events, and you can also get access to the free resources that we have available. And then before we start, I do have to read this disclaimer as it is. The following information, what is going to be presented today, is intended to assist you in spotting legal issues relevant to your small business in the state of California. There are many factors to be considered in determining which actions and decisions will be most appropriate to any specific situation, and this presentation is only for educational purposes. If you have a specific legal question regarding your business or your case, we encourage you to reach out to Tzedek so we can help you connect with an attorney that will answer those specific questions. As I said before, it is not intended to substitute legal advice, and you should decide what is the best course of action for your specific case. And then I'm just now very happy to introduce you to Joseph. He focuses on representing and advising corporate policyholders in complex insurance coverage matters. Joseph has handled insurance coverage claims under all forms of policies, including commercial general liability, directors and officers liability, employment practices liability, business interruption, among others. He's an expert on the topic, and we are very happy to have him today. We are a small group, so I will just ask you if you have any questions, you can either put them on the chat, and I will read them through Joseph after the presentation. And then if you at the end have questions, if we continue being a small group, we will be happy for you to unmute yourself and just ask your questions. If the questions are very specific to your case, I may ask you to, Joseph may provide a general question, and then I will ask you just to follow up with Tzedek so we can assist you to answer very, very specific questions. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. And it's your turn to share, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for that wonderful introduction. I am going to share my screen now. I can handle insurance coverage claims. I can handle being an attorney. I can't handle technology as well. So forgive me if there's any issues. Nadia, is it showing on the screen right now?
It's perfect. It's showing everything. We can see it great. Yeah.
That is an achievement in and of itself. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for spending some time with me this evening to go over insurance. It's what I do, it's what I love, and I'm happy to be able to partner up with Tzedek to help in any way I can. So today's presentation is about insurance basics for small businesses. I'll start off. We have this disclaimer. This is exactly the same disclaimer that Nadia had gone through so wonderfully before. We're attorneys, so we have disclaimers. That's what we do. But in insurance, it may be more appropriate than in a lot of other cases of law, because insurance is a unique area. Where, as it says over here, there are many factors to be considered in determining what decisions would be most appropriate. There's lots of decisions that have to be made with insurance. It's very highly specific and individualized to the person, to the type of business. Even if you're not a business owner, even if you're, for example, an individual who has a home and gets a homeowner's insurance policy, or you become a full-time driver and you need an auto insurance policy, all policies are created differently. Language changes depending on the insurance company, depending on your needs. It's all very highly fact specific. So today I'm here to provide legal information and try to give you the basics and nuts and bolts of insurance. But again, if you do have particular situations that come up that really need advice, I do encourage you to go through Tzedek. I know they're a great organization. They have great resources for things like this. One other quick note, we do have a lot to cover. And if I'm talking too fast at any time, I tend to do that sometimes. Feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. I'm used to it. I have 3 kids and I've been married for over 15 years, so I'm used to being interrupted. But again, my goal is to try to help you understand these things. And so if I'm going too fast, of course, let me know, but I'll try to speak slowly and clearly. So let's go to our first topic. Insurance policies or contracts. Being as it may, I imagine that you're all involved in businesses in one way or another. You have contracts with, whether it's your customers, suppliers, vendors, landlords, anything like that, tenants. You deal with contracts all the time. So you've seen contracts before, and insurance is just like that. An insurance policy is a contract. You pay a premium, a certain amount of money, typically on a monthly or semi-annual or annual basis, excuse me, to purchase the policy from the company, the insurance coverage, and in return you get coverage. Second most important point to know about these contracts is to read the insurance policy just like you would any other contract. The language in them is so highly important. I couldn't underscore the significance of the terms of the contract. A lot of time there's legalese, and so sometimes you might need some help with it, or it takes time to digest. But it's important because each insurance policy can be different. You want to know what's covered, what for what types of incidents or what types of loss are you going to be covered if something happens, and what's excluded, so you know what to anticipate if something happens at your business. It's a contract, there's limits. Unfortunately, policies don't give you unlimited coverage, so there's going to be policy limits, which essentially says if there's an incident, some type of accident, some type of damage to property, how much coverage are you covered for? How much insurance are you available to recover if something happens? Another thing to know is if there's a deductible or self-insured retention, they're both very similar things. Essentially, it's what you have to pay if something happens. For example, if there is a fire at your property, you have a commercial property insurance, and let's say there's $1 million limit, there might be a deductible of $50,000. At the first $50,000 to repair your property is going to be on you. So the deductible or self-insured retention is what you have to pay besides the insurance. They're pretty much the same. The difference is usually a self-insured retention is something you have to pay up front yourself before the policy will start, before the insurance company will start providing its benefits and its limits. But you'll have to pay that money up front. A deductible, usually the insurance company will pay from the policy itself before, and then will come to you to get reimbursed for whatever deductible you owe. Next, what are the insured responsibilities in an event of a claim? That's something very important to know. There's going to be conditions inside of a policy, and we'll talk about that soon enough. But you want to make sure that you comply with all the terms of the policy, because insurers are going to be looking to deny coverage for whatever reason they can, and you don't want to give them a reason to. So you want to look at what your responsibilities are in an event that you actually do have an insurance claim. Lastly, does an insurer owe a duty to defend? There's different types of policies, and we have what are called duty to defend policies. Essentially, if you are sued, if there's a lawsuit filed against you, you want to know whether or not the insurance company is going to have an obligation to provide you counsel, to provide you representation under the benefits of the policy. So typical kind of example, hypothetical situation of where insurance coverage might come into play. So here we have a display cabinet made by a company called We Made It. The display cabinet falls and injures Emma Hurt at a business called We Sold It, the seller, a big box retailer. Miss Hurt, Emma Hurt, filed a negligent, and this is a real story here. She files a negligence suit against We Sold It and We Made It, both the company that made it and sold this display cabinet, seeking money for bodily injury and other damages allegedly suffered as a result of the incident. Can insurance cover the damage to Miss Hurt and to We Made It and We Sold It? That's one of the things that we're going to talk about is insurance coverage and what types of insurance applies for situations like this. And can insurance cover legal fees incurred by We Made It and We Sold It? And again, it's going to be dependent upon the policies, but that's part of what insurance is meant to do, to provide you with representation if you're sued for incidents like this. It's important, as I mentioned before, the terms of the policy, the language of the policy is highly important to know. You want to know what property, events, or claims are covered. Again, we'll talk about the different types of policies, but each kind of policy has its own nuances with what it covers. You want to read and understand the exclusions. Exclusions are essentially conditions or parts of a policy that will tell you what is not covered. Even though something might seem like it's covered, there's an exclusion, and for one reason or another, it's not covered. For example, you might have caused some damage at your property or to somebody else, and typically there will be something called an intentional acts exclusion in certain kinds of policies. And what that really is saying is that even though the claim is technically covered initially, it's excluded. It really isn't covered. And it's excluded because you did something intentionally, and insurance is not meant to cover intentional acts. It's meant to cover accidents. Otherwise, people could just do things intentionally and then they'd be covered all the time. So it's really important to understand those exclusions. One other aspect of your insurance policy, and this is specifically for property type policies, is you want to know how your damaged property is going to be valued. And that's typically on replacement value or actual cash value basis. A replacement value is going to be better because that will be for what the product is worth now, whereas actual cash value will take into account depreciation. For example, let's say you have a computer or a phone that was damaged in your business and you need to now replace it. There was a fire at your property. Under replacement value, things go up in price. So to replace that phone, phones go up in price, inflation. We see things going up tremendously every year. It's gonna be more expensive now to replace it. So under replacement value, they will purchase for you a completely new piece of property that's of like kind and quality. Actual cash value, they're going to depreciate for how long you've owned that property. So the value will be that they give you will be closer to the amount that you originally paid. All right, next slide. Going on about the terms of the insurance policy, it's important to know about time limitation on how long you can file a claim. There's going to be something called notice conditions. And again, like I said before, you want to make sure to comply with all the conditions of the policy. You want to know what time period is covered. What is the term of the covered policy period? So every policy will cover a certain period of time. Typically, it's done on an annual or a yearly basis. You want to know also whether coverage depends on when the accident or incident occurred, or if coverage depends on when a claim was made. And before I get to both of those points, the difference between those, one interesting thought is, what is a claim? A lot of times you'll have policies that are called claims made policies. And they'll say, and this is where it's important to look at the language in the policy. You'll have a definition section which explains, for example, like what is a claim? A claim could be a lawsuit. It could be a letter that's sent by somebody just demanding something. There's a lot of ways that claim can be defined, and it's important to read the policy language to understand, because if there is a claim, that could trigger your obligation to fulfill other requirements, like I said before, that you need to comply with under the policy, as far as when you need to file a claim and when you need to give notice to the insurance company, things like that. So let's talk about occurrence policies. There's occurrence and claims made policies. So when does coverage depend on when the accident or incident occurred? An occurrence coverage policy provides coverage for claims where the occurrence takes place during the policy period, regardless of when the claim is made and when the injury is discovered. So essentially that comes up if, let's say, for example, you're a restaurant owner, it's 2018 and you have insurance with company A. You have a special ingredient in one of your food products that you sell to somebody, and lo and behold, it makes people sick, but you just don't know about it. And it takes a long time for that to happen. 2019, a year later, you switch insurance to insurance B. And then a year later after that, one of your old customers comes to you and says, hey, back in 2018, I consumed some product from you and I found out later that I got sick and now I want some money from you. Now I'm going to sue you unless you pay me for my medical expenses. Well, under occurrence coverage, you're going to look at when the injury first took place, the injury causing event. And in this case, it would be 2018 when you had insurance A before you switched your insurances. So in an occurrence policy, you'd be filing a claim with your first insurance company, not the second one, not insurance B. Other types of policies have claims made coverage. That's where it depends on what the insurance company that's going to provide coverage is going to depend on when the claim was made. And like I said before, claim can mean different things under different policies, but essentially a claim will be some sort of lawsuit or demand for money. That's usually how it's defined. And the insurance company that's going to provide coverage is going to be the one that's covering you when the claim is made. So in that past example with the restaurant, it's going to be the insurance company B, because even though the person and when they first were injured by consuming the product, by consuming the food, that was during the prior policy when you were with insurance A, that isn't what matters for claims made coverage. It matters when someone actually makes a claim against you. There's one other thing, there's something called claims made and reported coverage. That's a little bit more stringent in that it's not only about the claim being made during a certain time, but also you have to give notice. And I talked about when you have to let the insurance company, the timing requirements to notify them about the claim. During claims made and reported coverage, the claim and the notice have to take place during the policy period. First step in insurance is before you even get the policies, you actually have to figure out what policy you need and what type of coverage you want and limits and so forth, and look at all your options out there as far as insurance goes. And to do that, people will usually go to an agent or a broker. Now, typically, generally, I would suggest consulting with an insurance broker rather than an agent. And this is, again, generally will typically be somebody who represents the insurance company's interest. They're more of a paper pusher, someone who is just taking information and getting you situated and coordinated with that one specific company's insurance coverage. A broker, on the other hand, will generally represent an insured's interest, and they're looking out more for you. Now, hire a broker who's knowledgeable about your business or your area of business, and is knowledgeable about what insurance product that you would purchase. Brokers are when they offer you insurance, it can be like a buffet of food where everything looks appetizing and the benefit of everything. There's lots of different policies, and each one has its unique aspects and can provide benefits to you. But for example, whereas one company, let's say you're, I like to use an example of a power drill manufacturer, you might need a products liability policy. But let's say you're a pillow manufacturer, probably not as important. I mean, it's, again, something that you can look into, but it's not maybe as significant as if you were a power drill manufacturer. But brokers can provide you all your options, but you want to try to find a broker that knows your industry specifically. They specialize, they're very highly specialized sometimes. Some work with small businesses. If you can find one, that's great. If you're, for example, we worked with who had an amusement park, and there's some brokers that specialize in amusement park insurance. That's one example of where a broker might have specialized knowledge, where they can tell you about businesses in your specific region. If you're in a different part of Los Angeles County, or even outside of LA County, they can look at your specific city, specific area sometimes, the size of your business, how many employees you have, and they should be able to help you and give you a more customized look at what type of insurance you're going to need. Let's talk about managing liability. So that's what you do with insurance. You're essentially trying to manage risk. And there's lots of different policies out there. There's general liability insurance product liability, which I mentioned, information risk. That's something like your cyber insurance policies. That's where, for example, if you have a data breach of some kind, you're about cybersecurity threats, people doing ransomware. Cybersecurity is meant for things like that. Professional liabilities, errors and omissions policies, property policies, employment practices liability policies, and others. And that there's workers' comp, business vehicle, earthquake insurance. There's lots of different types of policies. So policies generally have two different categories. There's first party policies. Those are the ones that will protect you for your own loss to your own property. And third party, which protects you against claims by another party or another individual or entity. So under third party, you have, for example, general liability, products liability, employment practices liability. Those are all things where somebody might sue you or demand something from you. First party property is when you're protecting your own property, your own inventory, equipment, your own building structure. So that's where you have your property, your fire, your life and health insurance, homeowners, things like that. The types of loss that might be covered under these different types of policies is under first party, again, where we have, something along the lines of fire or earthquake or some type of policy like that. You're looking at the value of your property, the money it takes to repair or replace that property, what business interruption costs, that's for the loss of income you suffer while your property is damaged. For example, let's say you have some specialized equipment that you can't use because it's been destroyed in a fire and you're trying to replace that. Business interruption can help cover the time that your business is down and the money that you're losing during that time. Third party losses include damages, settlement, regulatory fines, defense costs. That's essentially where you're sued or someone's made a demand from you for some type of damage that's been done to them. And third party policies are meant to protect you and help you recover for damages you might have to pay, for a settlement, for a judgment against you in a lawsuit, things like that. Types of policies, the policy itself. Let's talk about what a policy looks like. There's something called a certificate of insurance. You might hear that term, you might see what that is. That's not an insurance policy, that's essentially a proof of insurance. Yeah, there's a declarations page. That's something that's important to look at. It has critical details on there, but it doesn't have everything you would need in the policy. The actual policy itself has forms and endorsements. I'll tell you what that means shortly, but essentially that's the nuts and bolts of the policy. All the language, the definitions, the conditions, all the forms that you're going to need to know what's covered, how to comply with the insurer's conditions, everything you'll need to know. It's going to be in a big package, and that's what the policy is. Like I said before, you want to be familiar with the entire policy, including the exclusions, and you'll want to know also what another point is, you'll want to know if you may be covered under other insurance policies. And what I mean by that is, for example, a lot of times if you're a tenant, a landlord may have a policy where you qualify as something called an additional insured. You have your primary insured, which is usually the person who buys the policy. But a lot of times you can name other people as insureds and they'll have some benefits under the policy as well. So it's important to know if other people, perhaps a vendor or some other business has you named as an additional insured. Quickly about the declarations page, that will give you a good idea of the some of the more important highlights of your policy. I'll tell you who the insured is, who's the person that's covered, or the entity, the business entity that's covered, the name of the business entity that's covered, their address, things of that nature. It'll tell you if the occurrence or event giving rise to the claim happens during the policy period. So if you have some sort of demand that's made of you, you'll be able to see the policy period that's covered under the policy on the declarations page. It'll also tell you what the deductible is, assuming there is one. And most importantly for a lot of people is, what are the limits of your coverage? What amounts is the insurer going to pay? And what is the aggregate? So a lot of times you'll see different numbers for the limits. You'll see something that might say, for example, under a general liability policy, you might have different coverages for, you might have limits for bodily injury. And for bodily injury, for somebody that gets hurt on your property, there might be a $500,000 limit per person. And there could also be a $500,000, let's say even larger, $1 million in the aggregate. And what that means is that, let's say you had 10 people get injured during the year, during the policy period, you don't get $500,000 for each separate person. That would be $5 million. You have an aggregate, which is essentially a cap, a limit on how much they're willing to pay. And if that's lower, in the hypothetical I just gave $1 million, that's the most they're going to be willing to pay for anything during that policy period. Insuring agreements, that is what you'll, and again, this is what you would see in your policy. And this is the part of the policy where essentially the insurer is making its promise to you about what they're going to pay. This is an important part. This is the critical part to find out if your claim will be covered. Looking at this specific one, just to read through it quickly, it's an example of an insuring agreement. It says, the insurance company says, we will pay those sums that the insured becomes legally obligated to pay as damages because of bodily injury or property damage to which this insurance applies. We will have the right and duty to defend the insured against any suits seeking those damages. Let me just stop quickly here. You'll see some of these words are in quotes. That's usually because that's going to be, there will be a definition section which will explain what those words
Joseph, you are cutting just a little bit. Like sometimes, yeah, the connection is.
All right. Can you hear me all right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. What I was just saying was that you'll see words in quotation marks. Typically, these words will be defined in another section, the definition section of the policy. And it's important to know what that means. Bodily injury can mean a lot of things. And you'll want to know, does it include, for example, just physical injury? Does it include emotional distress to somebody? Or for example, like I said before, again, it says here the insurance company has a right and duty to defend against any suit. Suit can take a lot of meanings. Lawsuit could just be a letter that they write to you. It could mean a lot of things. It seems obvious, but it's very important to look at how these terms are defined. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Conditions precedent. What these are the conditions that are laid out in a policy that require you, the insured, the policyholder, to take some sort of action. For example, the insurer might condition its promise to pay on the insured, providing notice within a certain amount of time. And this is what I was trying to talk about before that. It's really important to look at the policy and look at the language and make sure you comply with their condition, because that's usually going to be what can help make or break whether or not you have a claim that will be covered. For example, you'll see in this language that we have here, it talks about what your obligations are, your duties in the event of some sort of claim or suit or occurrence. It says you must see to it that we are notified as soon as practicable of an occurrence or an offense which may result in a claim. To the extent possible, notice should include, and it includes how and when it took place, different details. But it's important to read this because it's telling you exactly what you need to do. So it's important to read all the conditions of a policy and make sure you comply with them. Exclusions. These are the nasty things in an insurance agreement that take away coverage. They narrow the scope of coverage that you are provided by eliminating or limiting coverage for certain types of risks. Let's see here. There are certain, let me give you some examples from general liability policies. You'll see typically that a few slides ago, I had mentioned an insuring agreement, which tells you when you have coverage. Well, an exclusion can take away coverage. And one example might be where one of your workers, your employees are injured in their course of employment. And the reason why that is, general liabilities will exclude that from coverage because they say that should be covered under a workers' compensation policy. Other typical exclusions include pollution exclusions or damage due to asbestos, lead, and mold, coverage for intentional bad acts, such as intentionally destroying property or striking a person. Again, I think I had mentioned this earlier on, that insurance isn't necessarily meant to always cover something that's done intentionally, because it's meant to deter you from doing bad acts like that. So moving on from the exclusions, endorsements, that's another important part of the policy. And what endorsements really are is they're usually not necessarily part of the policy documents. They'll be an add-on to a policy document. So endorsements add, delete, or change language to a policy and can basically do just about anything. They'll be usually tacked on in addition to your primary documents, but they'll be part of the package of your policy. And I'll say usually at the top some type of endorsement, like an absolute pollution exclusion endorsement, or some states have specific endorsements because based on their laws, they require them. So an endorsement is really something that also can be negotiated with the insurance company. It can change anything that's in your policy: who's an insured, your limits of liability, locations that are insured, the definitions and exclusions, the conditions, the notice requirements. So you might have a policy that says, for example, that you have to give notice within 60 days of when something occurs, when a claim occurs. But you might also have an endorsement that changes that and says you only have to give notice within 120 days. And the endorsement will control it, will change the language of the policy itself. Now, the question is, why don't they just change it initially in the policy itself? Well, that's because insurance companies are hesitant to do, are cautious and hesitant to change things that are really standardized in the insurance industry. So they do it by a separate form, which they call an endorsement. Let's talk about the different types of policies out there. The first one mentioned in that list before is general liability insurance. This will cover you for accidents and injuries to someone other than yourself, so essentially a third party. It's not gonna, there's usually an exclusion, like I said before, for intentional acts, so it usually needs to be unintentional. It needs to result in some sort of bodily injury or property damage, or some personal and advertising injury. Um, Bodily injury can mean a lot of things, like I said before, can mean just physical injury and sickness, or death, or sometimes includes or doesn't include emotional distress. What it'll cover you for: defense fees, medical expenses, settlements, judgments. If someone slips and falls on property, depending on the type of injury that they have and the extent, it could be very costly. And it could be that you have to defend yourself in a lawsuit. So general liability insurance is going to provide you with an attorney to help pay those legal bills. It's gonna, if you have to pay for the medical expenses for the person that slipped and fell at your property, it's going to help do that. So general liability insurance is very common. Product liability insurance, that's more appropriate for somebody that's in the distribution chain. So somebody who manufactures, wholesales, distributes, or retails a product, you can be held liable to a certain extent for the safety of that product. And it depends really on the type of product that you're selling. So the risk and cost for that insurance will depend on how dangerous the product is. Like I said before, if you're somebody who makes power drills or swords or a gun manufacturer, for example, the risk and cost for that type of insurance is going to be much higher and more prohibitive than somebody who makes pillows or silicone baking products, for example. It also matters in what region of the country that they're being sold or used. Lots of things, and again, that's where a broker comes in and help advise you based on your particular business industry, what type of insurance and how much coverage you really need. There's professional liability insurance. A lot of times this is also referred to errors and omissions, malpractice insurance. This is for people in the professional services industry, give expert advice, recommendations, design products, provide physical care. It can cover you for negligent acts in providing professional services to others. It'll cover you for any sort of judgment and defense costs. For example, if you're an esthetician and you if you're a manicurist and you're doing something else and you injure them while doing that and they sue you, professional liability insurance can help cover you for that. If you're an accountant and you make a mistake on doing someone's taxes, accountants typically will carry liability insurance. And the last point here is that some professions require such insurance by law. For example, attorneys have professional liability insurance. Commercial property insurance, that's going to cover your loss or damage to your business property from any sort of kind of physical acts, such as something, if there's a fire, smoke, wind, hailstorms, vandalism, things of that nature. Property can be used pretty broadly. You need to look at it, like I said before, the terms, the definitions of the policy to see how it's defined. But it's usually something that's physical or tangible. It could be lost income. It could be damage to inventory, equipment, money, things like that. One of the interesting things that's come up in recent times is cryptocurrency, whether or not that's considered property, because it's an issue of whether or not it's physical or tangible, something that you can touch. I won't get into the details of that, but that's been an interesting issue lately. It'll cover you essentially for your building structure if you have damage to the building that you're in and to your own personal property. There's two types of property policies. There's all risk policies, and that will cover a wide range of incidents. It'll essentially cover it's broad that it covers you essentially for everything, except for the things that are explicitly excluded, that are in the exclusion insurance policy. And those exclusions, some of the typical ones, again, pollution, something where it's there's something caused by an earthquake or a loss caused by mold. And then there's specific peril policies. And those are ones which don't give you that broad coverage unless it's excluded. Those are for specific things. You'll see, like, for example, fire insurance or earthquake insurance, business interruption insurance. First party property policies. They usually will cover businesses for loss of income resulting from a suspension of their operations. Like I said before, if your business has to close because of a fire, for example, it'll help cover that loss of income during that time your business is closed. It might extend not only to losses from the suspension of your own operations, but also to loss for the suspension of a supplier's or customer's operations. And we call this contingent business insurance and business interruption insurance. But for example, let's say you're a cell phone manufacturer or seller, and to make your cell phones, you require certain types of chips. And the company that makes the chips has had a fire itself and it's out of business. So you can have contingent business interruption insurance, which basically will cover you for that time that you can't make your product because a business that you rely on has now suffered some kind of loss. So it's important when it comes to these property policies to see whether or not the coverage can be triggered. And what that means is looking at that insuring agreement we had seen an example of before, and seeing with all those words that are in quotation marks and looking at the language to see if it applies to the loss that you suffer. Physical loss or damage is usually a prerequisite for these first party proper. I'm sorry, having trouble enunciating today. Physical loss or damage is a prerequisite in first party property policies. So the exposure at issue usually must be tied to some actual physical type of damage. Employment practices liability for somebody who has employees. It protects you against claims that might be filed by your employees against you. Typical claims are things like discrimination, harassment, retaliation, wrongful termination, like that. And it can cover you for any lawsuit for your defense fees and for any judgment against you if they recover money against you. Let's say you go to trial in the lawsuit and they secure a judgment against you, you're held to be liable. Insurance can help offset those costs. Let's talk about the insured's obligation. That's the policyholder. Just so in case I didn't make it clear before, insured and policyholder are interchangeable. So the insured needs to pay the premiums when they're due. That means you have to make your payments on the policy. You have to give timely notice of claims. You have to protect the property from further damage. You have to cooperate with the insurer in its investigation and handling of any claims if they make requests of you. You have to be very careful that you're going to probably have to provide them with a lot of information, and you should cooperate. We call that the duty to cooperate. And prepare an inventory of damaged personal property that shows the quantity, description, the actual value, and the amount of loss. Let's talk about the notice requirement. It depends, and every different policy might be different, but essentially if you have some sort of loss that you suffer, whether it's a lawsuit filed against you with a liability policy, or there's a fire at your property or some damage, someone breaks a glass window or something, you want to contact your agent, your broker, and the insurer right away, and not let time pass too long. As you'll see here in this example, the first full paragraph says, this policy is written on a claims made basis. This policy applies only to claims first made during the policy period. Claims must be reported in writing during the policy period or within 60 days after the end of the policy period. So it's setting that timeline. You want to make sure to comply with those requirements. There'll be a cooperation requirement that an insured has to cooperate, doing several things. You might have to make documents available for inspection by the insurance company. The insurance company might want to interview you. If you're being sued, they might require that you assist them in defending the lawsuit on your behalf by going to depositions or trials. That's the duty to cooperate. If your policy provides business income coverage, you'll need business records to establish what your losses would be. Unfortunately, the insurance companies don't just take you at your word for it. So you might need historical sales records, profit and loss statements, receipts for damaged inventory, income and expense information, anything that will help show how much money you've lost during that period. Let's talk about what the insurance company's obligations are. So we've talked about the policyholder. Now, what does the insurer have to do? Usually they have to acknowledge your claim. They have to investigate. They have the right and duty to defend and provide counsel, which we've talked about a little bit. They have the right to select the defense counsel. I'll talk about that in a minute, and the right to settle. Generally, an insurer receives notice of a claim or occurrence. It will acknowledge the notice in writing and indicate that a claim handler, somebody, will be assigned to your claim to follow up regarding the matter. The acknowledgement will most likely contain a claim reference number. You'll want to keep that handy. You'll want to make sure to keep that for your records. I'll usually show when you submitted it. And that's important, again, for those notice requirements to show that you actually submitted a claim within the time period that you had to do it. Duty to investigate. The claim handlers is going to want to review the notice after it gets your notice of claim. It's going to review the notice because that will typically have detail about what the claim is. They'll usually request any additional information from you to help them evaluate the claim, and then they'll assess the claim for coverage and decide whether or not they are going to accept coverage or deny coverage. Many policies, and we talked about CGL, which stands for Comprehensive General Liability Policies. They give the insurer the right and duty to defend a suit or claim. And what that basically means is that they have an obligation to represent you and defend you for a suit that's filed against you. And again, suit can be a lot of things. You'll have to look in the policy for the definition, but typically they'll include at the very least a lawsuit. So they have the obligation that they're required to defend you in that lawsuit. They have the right to select defense counsel. An insurer typically has the right to select the counsel, but for some policies, you have the ability to give your own input. But typically, they do have an obligation to provide you with adequate and competent counsel. So you don't have to worry too much about whether or not they're competent, but they should be. At the same time, you can have some input and you can request to have input on who the choice of counsel will be. And depending on how the policy is worded, you might be able to get your choice. They might have to listen to you, or they might just select who they decide is best to handle your lawsuit. Rights to settle. A lot of policies most give the insurer or the insured the right to settle subject to the consent of the other. Here's an example of what that language might look like. It says, we, the insurer, may at our discretion investigate any occurrence and settle any claim or suit that may result. So essentially, it's saying that an insurer has the right to settle the lawsuit if it deems that it's going to be reasonable. Talking about how much insurance coverage you might need. I can't tell you how much you need. Unfortunately, that's a little bit out of my purview. That's really for an insurance agent or broker. So again, it might vary by business depending on the type of risk that you have. A business, like I said before, that makes power tools has a greater risk of being sued than one that makes towels. An insurance agent or broker can look at your specific factors, looking at similar businesses, looking at how many employees you have, things of that nature, to try to help you decide what types of policies and how much you need in coverage under those policies. Now, again, I don't know all of your businesses, but I imagine some of you might be tenants as part of your businesses. You have some sort of property. You have a commercial property where you have a tenant and you have a landlord for your business. So generally, if you look at the agreement for your business, it should say and lay out the insurance details between you and your landlord. Some of them will require you to name the landlord as an additional or named insured on the policy. And I kind of mentioned that before, basically on the declarations page of your policy, that front page with all those important critical details, the lease will say that you need to name the landlord as an insured so that they get benefits under the policy as well. Many property owners are requiring their commercial tenants to obtain their own insurance. It adds a layer of protection for landlords to injuries to the property. As a commercial tenant, general liability insurance will help protect you from claims related to both customers. So you'll be protected from things that happen when a customer comes in, as well as your neighboring commercial tenants if you're, for example, in a strip mall or something of that nature. Tenants will not be responsible for structural costs on a general basis, like if you have something to fixtures like a broken toilet or if you have to fix a ceiling, but you might be responsible for damages to your office space caused by your business's activity. So a couple quick examples. You have a business and it causes an electrical fire that damages part of your office and other neighboring offices in your office building. Property owners, the landlords, will sometimes require tenants to have their own liability insurance to cover for damages like that. Or in this other example, if you're a manufacturer renting a warehouse to store equipment and inventory, you'll need insurance not only to protect damage that happens and occurs to the warehouse by your business operations, but also for damage to your own inventory and equipment that you store there. A landlord's own insurance will typically cover the building, but it won't necessarily cover you as the tenant, the business owner, your equipment and your contents. That's why tenants and business owners will get commercial property insurance to protect their personal property from theft, damage, and natural disasters, for example. Insurance can help protect the tenant from damages that you make. Damages or theft, vandalism by a third party, for example, damages to or theft of equipment or inventory, damages to the property as a result of fire or some other natural disaster, and accidents or injuries that occur in that space that to a lawsuit. Somebody comes into your business, for example, and hurts themselves. That's what your insurance will protect you from. These days, a lot of people have at-home businesses. Most homeowners policies contain business use exclusion, excuse me, that denies coverage to business equipment, supplies, and inventory. So if you work from home, if you have a home business and you have computers, you have inventory, you run things out of your operations out of your home, and you have a homeowner's policy, be very careful because that might not cover you for your business use. You can ask your homeowner's insurance to add what they call a rider. It's kind of like that endorsement. It adds coverage for your business at an extra cost. Otherwise, the homeowner's insurance is likely not going to pay for any liabilities from your home business. For example, if a tree crashes into your home during a storm and damages the computers inside, and then you have to have a computer technician come to the business part of your property where you run your business, and then they trip and fall, whether or not there's coverage for all those different types of things, damaged equipment, for someone to defend you in the lawsuit against the computer technician who hurt themselves. Coverage can revolve around whether or not you have business insurance. Without business insurance, you'd only be in that scenario, you'd only be covered for the roof. For the tree that crashed into the roof, that would be covered by your homeowners, but for everything else, you wouldn't be covered. Nadia, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, I think we need to start wrapping up, and because I want to leave time in case people has questions.
All right. I'll just go through the last slides quickly and just let me see if there's anything quickly here that I really want to highlight.
Okay.
During the pandemic, a lot of people might have noticed there's been COVID-19 has caused a lot of businesses to shut down, things of that nature. There's been a lot of across the country, there's been a lot of lawsuits by policyholders who have to shut down their business, and they try to make claims for loss of business income, business interruption losses. And there's been a question about whether or not COVID-19, as I said before, to have these policies cover, you need to have some sort of physical loss or damage. And there's been a question about whether or not COVID-19, the virus, actually causes causes physical loss or damage. So that's been really a hot button issue, and it's still being resolved. And it's actually up to the California Supreme Court right now, who's going to be deciding on the issue at some point. Let's see, as far as if you do have business interruption coverage, that again covers you for lost income. Just going through this quickly, you want to make sure that you have all your files. You'll want to have your policies. You'll want to have an order. You'll want to have your documents, things that show your lost income, your profit and loss statements, maybe your sales records, things like that. Let's see if there's anything else here that I think that's it. I know that was a lot. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, or there was a clear enough connection for everybody to hear me, but I do want to give everybody some time. I know it's getting late. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer? And again, feel free, if you'd like, you can always talk to Nadia directly, and always ask questions if you have with Tzedek as well. But does anyone have any questions?
We are a small group, so either you can put them on the chat or you can unmute yourselves right now.
And don't be shy. I've done a lot of talking, so it's your turn. But again, don't feel pressure to ask questions. But if you have anything, I'm happy to answer.
My name is Andrea. I just have a quick question. If I wanted to get, and I don't know, because you went really detailed, but I wouldn't know the specifics. But if I needed something with a some type of insurance for me to do filming inside of museums, and one particular museum wants me to have a minimum of $1 million insurance policy, which seems like it's like probably the